Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Before I dive in, don't forget to like, share this video with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more powerful stories like this one. I thought I had finally walked into my fairy tale when I married Damien Hart. Our wedding was stunning, held in the heart of Chicago at a rooftop venue overlooking the skyline. The lights shimmered, the champagne flowed, and my friends hugged me with tears in their eyes, saying how lucky I was. Damien stood tall in his navy tuxedo, his smile charming, his vows so eloquent they made half the crowd weep. I couldn't believe I had found a man so articulate, so polished, so devoted, or at least that's what I thought. The first week of marriage felt ordinary, maybe even sweet. Damien was attentive in his own structured way. He woke early every morning, exercised for exactly 45 minutes, showered, dressed in meticulously pressed suits, and left the house as if every day were a performance. He kissed my cheek before leaving, always the cheek, never my lips, and though it struck me as odd, I brushed it off as his way of being proper. We were adjusting, I told myself. New marriages take time. But as the days stretched into weeks, the cracks began to show. Every attempt I made to bring intimacy into our marriage was met with a cold wall. When I leaned into him at night, he'd gently shift away, muttering, "I'm tired." When I reached for his hand, he pretended not to notice. When I tried to initiate something deeper, he would stiffen and push my hand off his chest with that rehearsed phrase, "My body, my choice." At first, I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his tone was firm, his face unreadable. The rejection sank into me like an icicle. 6 weeks into marriage, I was no longer laughing. I lay awake at night on my side of the bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling while Damien slept with his back to me. No whisper of comfort, no warmth, no effort to bridge the distance. I began questioning everything. Was I unattractive? Did I do something wrong? Or was he simply struggling to adjust? The silence in our bedroom was deafening, and slowly, I felt myself unravel. Still I tried. I cooked his favorite meals, surprised him with little gifts, and suggested spontaneous weekend getaways. He dismissed every gesture with polite indifference, as though I were a guest he tolerated in his home. The most I received was a forced smile and a thank you, never followed by conversation, never by affection. He was present physically but absent in every other way. One night I gathered my courage and suggested we try marriage counseling. Damien was sitting in his leather chair, polishing his watch as if it were the most important task in the world. Without even looking up, he said, "We just need more time to adjust. Don't make everything into a problem, Elise." His voice was clipped, his patience thin. Elise, that was me, Elise Monroe, the woman who had once believed she was his soulmate. My heart sank. I knew at that moment that whatever we were going through, I was going through it alone. The more I paid attention, the more I noticed his obsessive routines. His phone never left his side, not even when he showered. He spent hours pacing our living room late at night, whispering into it as if guarding state secrets. Sometimes, when I entered the room unexpectedly, he would jolt like a guilty teenager caught in the act. He gave flimsy explanations, work calls, colleagues from another time zone, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted, cold and calculated. Worse than his secrecy was the strange sense of relief that flickered in his expression whenever I left the house. If I announced I was going to visit a friend or run errands, his shoulders would ease, and he'd encourage me to take my time. That small release of tension in his face stung me like a knife. A husband should miss his wife, shouldn't he? Shouldn't he want to spend time together? One Friday evening, I decided to test him. I told him I had dinner plans with a girlfriend and left the house. Instead of going far, I parked my car 2 blocks away and waited. Within minutes, Damien emerged, freshly changed into casual clothes, his step quick, his demeanor different, lighter, freer. My stomach twisted as I watched him disappear down the street. Phone pressed to his ear, his voice lifted with a laughter I hadn't heard in weeks. I drove home trembling. I didn't yet know the truth, but I knew this wasn't the marriage I signed up for. I sat in the dark living room until he returned hours later, whistling under his breath like a carefree man. He froze for a split second when he saw me awake, then plastered on a smile and said, "Oh, you're still up? I thought you'd be tired." His tone was casual, but his eyes were calculating, scanning me for suspicion. That night, as I lay on the cold side of the bed again, a single thought consumed me. What was Damien hiding? Because it wasn't just about intimacy anymore. It wasn't about affection withheld or the phrase "my body, my choice" echoing in my ears. It was about something deeper, something poisonous lurking in the shadows of our marriage. And I knew sooner or later, I would have to dig until I found it. The night I decided to dig into Damien's secrets, I felt like a trespasser in my own home. I waited until he left early for one of his so-called financial conferences. He kissed me on the cheek before walking out, his cologne lingering long after the door closed. I stood there, staring at the lock, my pulse thundering. Then I turned back into the house, ready to uncover the truth. I started in his office, a space I rarely entered because Damien had made it clear it was his zone. The room smelled faintly of leather and paper, his shelves lined with books on economics, psychology, and a few travel guides. But it wasn't the books I cared about. It was the locked drawer in his mahogany desk. I had seen him place envelopes inside before, and my gut told me whatever he was hiding lived there. After fumbling for several minutes, I found a spare key taped under the drawer itself. My hand shook as I unlocked it, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Inside were files, receipts, and a neatly folded slip of paper. My eyes fell on the receipt, first a flower shop purchase in Las Vegas dated 3 months ago. During the very weekend Damien claimed he was at a Salt Lake City conference. I unfolded the slip of paper tucked behind it, and found a Nevada phone number scrawled in hurried handwriting. My throat tightened. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe. But deep down I already knew. That evening I casually asked him about Salt Lake. I watched his eyes flicker as he told me about endless meetings and late-night dinners with executives. He spun the story smoothly, but now that I knew what to look for, the cracks were everywhere. The too perfect details, the rehearsed tone. My suspicions grew roots. From then on, I paid attention to every little thing. The way he carried his phone like a lifeline. The way he flinched when it buzzed in front of me. The way he would excuse himself to the balcony or car to take calls. One night, when he left the room mid-conversation, I quietly picked up our landline and pressed it to my ear. Faint laughter, a woman's voice, and Damien's soft murmur. "I miss you too, darling." My stomach lurched. I wanted to scream, to storm outside and confront him, but instead I placed the receiver down slowly, silently, and forced myself to smile when he returned. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. The next day, I confided in someone I trusted, an attorney friend, Evelyn Ross. Over coffee in a quiet cafe, I told her everything. Damien's rejection, the flower receipt, the late-night calls. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes fixed on me. When I was done, she leaned in and said softly, "Elise, I think this goes deeper than an affair. You need a professional investigator." That's how Marcus Hale came into my life. He was a private detective Evelyn recommended. A man with a rugged calmness and eyes that had clearly seen too many secrets. I met him in his office, where the blinds were always drawn and the desk stacked with case files. After I explained everything, Marcus leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "Your husband might be a lot more than unfaithful," he said. "Guys like him? They target women, usually wealthy ones. They marry quickly, isolate them, and then drain them dry." His words hit me like a storm. I told him about my trust fund, the inheritance left by my grandmother, carefully locked in a financial institution that required both Damien's and my signatures for access. Marcus nodded slowly. That might be exactly what he's after. The next few weeks were a blur of secret meetings and late-night discussions with Marcus and Evelyn. They advised me not to confront Damien directly. Instead, we gathered evidence. Marcus tailed him, snapped photos of him meeting a woman outside hotels, traced his calls to a Nevada number registered to a woman named Clarissa. When Marcus showed me the first photograph of them together, my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. Damien was holding Clarissa's waist, leaning close with the same tenderness he had never once given me. It didn't stop there. One evening, when Damien left his phone unattended in the bathroom, I managed to open it with his passcode, his birthday, so predictable. My breath caught as the screen filled with messages. Not just flirty notes, but whole conversations. Our wedding day feels like yesterday, Clarissa had written. Damien had replied with a photo of a ring on his hand, identical to the one he wore when we exchanged vows. My world shattered. Scrolling further, I found wedding photos: Damien in a suit, Clarissa in a white dress, smiling like a queen. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor. I wasn't his only wife. I wasn't even his first. When Damien came out minutes later, I had already set his phone down, my face blank. He smiled faintly, oblivious, and walked past me. Inside, though, something in me snapped. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud, manipulation, theft of my life. That night, Marcus confirmed my worst fear. Damien didn't actually work at the prestigious firm he claimed. He had fabricated his position, lied about his credentials, and his so-called business trips were cover stories. Marcus's contacts discovered Damien had married Clarissa years before, and together they had scammed at least 3 other women, draining their accounts before vanishing. But the final blow came a week later, when Marcus revealed something that made my skin crawl. Clarissa wasn't just Damien's wife, she was his half-sister. They were running a sick, twisted scam built on deception and greed. My stomach turned at the thought of their intimacy, their alliance against innocent women like me. I could barely breathe. Every memory of Damien, the wedding vows, the kisses on my cheek, the polite smiles felt like venom coursing through my veins. But even as I shook with anger, one thought crystallized in my mind. I would not be their victim. Not anymore. Once I learned the full scope of Damien and Clarissa's deception, my heart stopped aching and started burning. The shock, the tears, the sleepless nights, those had already taken their toll. What replaced them was something colder, sharper, steadier. Revenge wasn't my initial thought. Survival was. But as Evelyn and Marcus laid out the reality, the two began to intertwine. To survive, I needed to bring them down. The first step was divorce. Evelyn advised me to file immediately. "We need to get the legal wheels turning," she said, sliding the papers across her polished oak desk. I stared at the stack, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. The marriage I thought was my forever had been nothing more than a weapon against me. Signing the first page, my hand trembled, but when the pen glided across my name on the final line, I felt a strange calm settle in my veins. We needed Damien to believe he was still in control. Marcus devised the plan to let Damien think I was too broken to suspect anything, too naive to see the truth. I played my part flawlessly. At home, I acted withdrawn but compliant. I didn't question his late nights. I pretended not to notice when his phone buzzed endlessly. I even cooked his favorite meals and smiled weakly when he said, "You're finally learning not to stress so much." Every word was a knife in my throat, but I swallowed the pain. Marcus wired the house phone, set up recording devices, and tracked Damien's accounts. One night, I caught the break we needed. Damien stepped into the kitchen, speaking softly into his phone, his voice dripping with affection I had never received. I stood by the doorway, every nerve in my body on fire, the recorder in my pocket catching every word. "I promise, love," Damien murmured. "Once Elise files, the trust fund will open. That prenup was airtight. She doesn't even know it tilts in my favor. We'll drain her account, close the deal, and then we'll finally disappear, just like last time." Clarissa's laughter rang faintly through the line. My chest tightened, rage threatening to spill, but I forced myself to stand still, expression blank, while inside I screamed. That recording was the smoking gun. When I gave the audio to Evelyn and Marcus, their faces hardened. "This is it," Marcus said. "We've got enough to involve the feds. But we need to let them attempt the fraud so the charges stick." The next days were excruciating. Damien became more affectionate, oddly so. He brushed my hair from my face, kissed my forehead, even suggested we plan a trip once things settle. Every gesture made my skin crawl, but I smiled like a dutiful wife, counting down the hours. Finally, the day came. Evelyn filed the divorce petition officially, which triggered Damien's next move. He and Clarissa attempted to access my trust fund, forging documents with my social security number and our marriage certificate. What they didn't know was that the financial institution had been alerted, the system flagged, and federal agents were waiting. Marcus called me just before it happened. "They're making the move now. Sit tight." My heart thudded as I paced my living room. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. "We got them," Marcus said simply. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming not of grief this time but of release. The image of Damien in handcuffs seared into my mind like justice finally delivered. The courtroom days that followed were surreal. I sat behind Evelyn, hands clasped tightly, while Damien and Clarissa stood at the defense table. Damien's face, once the mask of charm and control, now looked hollow, his eyes darting as evidence stacked against him. Clarissa tried to keep her chin high, but when the photos, messages, and recordings were played, she dropped her gaze, her facade crumbling. The jury took less than a day. Guilty. On all counts. Bigamy, marriage fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Damien was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Clarissa 8. The clang of the gavel echoed like thunder, and for the first time since our wedding, I felt free. Walking out of that courthouse, the crisp Chicago air hit my face, and I inhaled deeply. I wasn't just Elise Monroe, the deceived wife anymore. I was Elise Monroe, the woman who had faced betrayal, uncovered lies, and fought back with the truth. Healing wasn't immediate. Nights still came where I lay awake, memories creeping in, the sting of rejection whispering in my mind. But I reminded myself that I had reclaimed my power. Damien had thought I was weak, pliable, too blinded by love to notice the shadows he lived in. He had underestimated me. And because of that, he lost everything. I began sharing my story not out of shame, but as a warning. At support groups, online forums, quiet conversations with women who suspected their partners were hiding secrets. Every time I spoke, I saw the spark of recognition in their eyes, the relief that they weren't alone. My pain became their cautionary tale, my survival their hope. I knew I couldn't undo the past 6 weeks of lies, but I could build a future untethered from Damien's poison. Slowly, I stitched myself back together. I traveled, wrote, rediscovered the woman I was before him. And those scars remained. They became a map of where I had been and proof that I had endured. To anyone listening, I'll say this. Betrayal may cut deep, but truth heals deeper. Don't ignore the cracks in your life. Don't silence the voice in your gut. And never, ever let anyone convince you that your pain is your fault. I almost did, but I fought back and I won. So if you're watching this, I hope my story reminds you that strength often comes in the darkest moments. That revenge doesn't always mean violence, it can mean justice, truth, and reclaiming the life someone tried to steal from you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. And please comment below what lesson stood out to you most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just my story. It's a warning, a lesson, and a reminder that no matter how broken you feel, you are never powerless. Moral lesson. Life has a way of testing our strength in the quietest, cruelest ways. Sometimes, the betrayal comes not from strangers, but from the very person we trusted most. My marriage to Damien was a mask, a performance built to strip me of my dignity and security. But betrayal, as painful as it is, does not define us. What defines us is how we rise after the fall. In exposing Damien and Clarissa, I didn't just reclaim my financial safety, I reclaimed my voice. Too often, we ignore the whispers in our gut because we're afraid of what the truth might reveal. But truth, no matter how brutal, is always the path to freedom. If you've ever felt deceived, dismissed, or diminished, let my story remind you that your worth isn't tied to someone else's treatment of you. Healing is slow, justice is rarely simple, but both are possible when you believe in your own resilience. So keep moving forward, keep asking questions, and never allow betrayal to silence your strength. Because in the end, even the deepest wounds can become the foundation of your greatest comeback. Would you like me to now proofread and polish all 3 sections together into one seamless script? No repeats, perfect flow. So it's fully ready for your YouTube channel?